Hey, buddy Manning here. Welcome to the Garden Report. We're live on the scene in San Francisco. Josue Pavon by my side, and
Yes, sir.
we're going to do a full-length one here, pre-recorded before Game 2, coming to you live on Celtics All Access as well as CLNS Media here. And we just came from practice before Game 2. Ton of stuff, both teams. Draymond Green talking about his comments. Ime Udoka with some injury updates as well as rotation discussions. But Josue was able to catch up with Al Horford, Marcus Smart,
that was fun.
and talk about being this close to a championship, because we're finally seeing this team get within grasping point of a championship, which is hard to imagine just given where they were earlier this year.
I called it championship talk, and I asked Marcus about it, and Marcus said that, every team, most of the time at the beginning of the season, they talk about championships. But talking about it and actually going after it are obviously two completely different things. And the way he put it was just always in them trying to find themselves, find their identity. And of course, that was something that was always in the back of everybody's mind. It wasn't something that was talked about, but obviously going into the playoffs, and everyone sort of knew where they wanted to be, and they knew that they had something special with this team. So I guess the answer would be nothing. There was no championship talk, but it was sort of something that lingered in everyone's mind. And Al's response I loved, because Al said, look, when you play for the Boston Celtics, not to sound arrogant, I love how you put that in there, but it's always going to be about championships. He said even back in 2016 when he started his first stint in Boston, and when he signed as a free agent, the Celtics' first top-tier free agent signing in franchise history, he said that was the goal. That was something that was discussed beforehand, and every season throughout his time in Boston, whether it's back then or now when he returned, it's always been about getting a championship. It's always been about finding that type of team or that sort of connection that would lead them to this type of opportunity. And here we are now, 3 games, 3 wins away this Celtics team is from winning a championship. I don't think it's going to be that easy as in the next 3 games, but they are really, really close, and I like their chances right now, Bobby.
So the stat I've seen now after the Game 1 win is that teams that lose their Game 1 on their home court in the NBA Finals, 5-4 in that series. So the math...
The Lakers did it. That's the one that popped in my head right away. Not to cut you off, but Allen Iverson and the Sixers beating the Lakers in Game 1, and everyone was like, "Oh, here we go. The Lakers might have met their match, and Allen Iverson, look out!" But the Sixers never won another game that series.
So one of our videos earlier today, you were talking about the Game 1 stats, because in general in the playoffs, Game 1, you win that, you usually win the series. But I feel like as the playoffs go on, that number probably gets smaller, just because most of that's got to be round 1. Like a really good team maybe drops Game 1. I remember the Raptors a couple of years did that to the who was it, the Bucks maybe, or maybe vice versa, but there was some Magic Raptors, that's what it was, when the Raptors went on to win the championship. So teams drop Game 1s. I mean, the Celtics have done it twice in these playoffs, to the Heat and to the Bucks before then. They almost did it against the Nets. Yeah, so
game winner from Tatum, right?
It was pretty astounding what we saw in Game 1 between these two teams, but I don't want to necessarily say it's going to set a complete tone for a series, especially when the Warriors just don't seem worried about it at all. Now, I think that's not great from their perspective. Like, I think they should be more worried about the Celtics than they have been all along. But it does say something that they're looking at Game 1 and just saying, oh, screw it. They should hit 21 threes. We lost by 12. We'll at least have it closer next time around.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, Bob, because I actually got to talk with Andre Iguodala. And I asked him, well, not Andre, well, I talked to Andre Iguodala, but I also talked to Andrew Wiggins, The reason why I got confused there for a second, because Iguodala had a response as to what happened in that fourth quarter, what went wrong. And he says that, look, those are corrections that we're going to make, obviously, in Game 2. That's something that we've been watching film and, limiting the three-pointers, transition, taking care of the ball, all that stuff. But I thought Andrew Wiggins' response stood out to me. When I asked him in particular, I said, do you look at what was the overall demeanor of the team after losing Game 1? Do you look at that Game 1 matchup as the one that got away? Do you see it as that, I called it par for the course, a best-of-7 series? A lot of these players obviously have won championships. They've obviously been down in the series, so they've been there before. Was there that sort of that carelessness? Well, I didn't word it that way, but that's what I was getting at. And I want to say Wiggins paused for a good 5-6 seconds, and I felt like he wanted to be careful with what he was going to say before finally saying, Yeah, it's one that got away. We feel like it slipped through our fingertips. So I'm like, I don't know how telling that is. Maybe in his mind, he's probably thinking that, look, it is one that got away, but at the same time, they're so prepared going into game 2, or at least mentally, that they feel so confident going into game 2 that they can grab another win and that, they can lead that in their rear view at this point. But it could be a win or opportunity that could decide the whole series. I mean, if this thing goes 7 and the Celtics were to finish it off, if you're the Warriors, you have to wonder what could have been if they just played differently in that fourth quarter. Or how do you let a team go off for a 17-0 run? Or was that the telling sign of what was to come if the Celtics were to dominate the Warriors? But I think overall, what he said the answer that he truly believed in, that it was one that got away. But I do, again, we've been talking about it the last couple of days, Bobby. I feel like this Warriors team is just sort of like, they got that one, but they're not going to perform like that again. And the Celtics can absolutely perform like that again. When you look at the shooting performance that Jason Tatum had, their best player, I wouldn't be shocked that that's the worst shooting performance that we see out of Tatum this series. So for that alone, I felt like Wiggins should have right away been like, yes, that was the one that got away. We shouldn't have lost that one. We're disappointed in ourselves. But he wasn't. So I don't know. Take that for what it's worth. But I just thought it was an interesting response to hear from Wiggins.
Robert Williams back at practice today, and he's been a key that we've talked about throughout this series. If he was himself coming in, I would have probably picked Celtics in 5 or 6, because I just think he's such a matchup breaker in this series for the Warriors. They have no paint access when he's out there. Nobody, you talked about in our last video, Draymond Green, getting to the interior and making some stuff happen from there. The only guy I felt like got good rim looks in that game was Andrew Wiggins. He had a pretty good game, but not the kind that's going to swing it one way or another, right, especially as a non-shooter there. So there's got to be something that breaks for the Warriors to be able to open up the paint to looks. Steph Curry's a good finisher. Klay Thompson, I haven't watched a ton of him going downhill in these playoffs, but I didn't feel like that was the thing at all in Game 1 for him. Just overall a shaky Game 1 performance from him, and he's been inconsistent throughout these playoffs. And Jordan Poole was completely swallowed up by Boston's defense. So those are like the 3 heads of the snake for 4, if you want to call it that, for Golden State's offense. And instead they got Iguodala out there trying to run some 2-man game with Poole, and they're trying to shake some things up with some screen action out there. But for some reason, that Warriors offense that we looked at coming into the series and was like, this is an overwhelming unit. Once you took away the paint and Rob was able to do that, they look pretty normal offensively to me. Like, they just weren't an intimidating group.
Again, Bob, it goes to what we've been saying going into the series. Like, this just isn't that same Warriors team that was so scary, 3 years ago, or even
missing Durant. That's like the guy, right?
That's the guy. And people, it'd be lazy for us to be like, oh, you replace Durant with Wiggins. Like, it's not quite that simple, but in a sense, he is an ideal third option for that offense. But when, again, Klay's not himself right now, so they're in a tough spot. In my opinion, going into Game 2, if you're the Warriors, you have to find a way to get them going. But again, it can't just be about scoring. It can't just be about shooting, rather, right? It's got to be in transition, because he can get downhill. It's just that they don't look for him in that way, right? And Andrew Wiggins is a guy who's going to make those quick. What am I saying? What am I trying to say right now? He's going to make those quick decisions. He's not going to dribble the ball too much. He's carved out that role so nicely for them, and also being that defender that can stay in front of Jason or Jaylen Brown and force some turnovers. So I love him for that third role, that third option for the Warriors, but they have to get Klay going. And I think once that happens, it's going to open things up for shooters. It's going to open things up for guys that are in position to come in and score. Jordan Poole, defensively, I think we see Gary Payton come back in this one. I know he's not 100%, but he's been activated. They didn't go to him in Game 1. I think that's something that they're going to look at to try to slow things down when the Boston offense really gets going. So it'll be interesting to see those adjustments, come through from Steve Kerr, because he can't come with the same approach in Game 2.
I feel like injuries will still be one of the major things that swing this series. Both teams relatively healthy for now, but how does Rob come into Game 2? It's like any given day it could be different from him. Could even miss a game at some point, just based on how this injury is reacting. Now, we've talked about the gaps between games. Yeah. That works in his favor. That's another reason I really think the Celtics are going to win this series, because if you get him at 80-85% for 20 minutes a game, that's just a ginormous win. And then you sprinkle in your Tice minutes, Grant, you go smaller with Pritchard, and that's a formula that works in this series. But Rob's got to be available to some degree and look like himself. The Payton one's interesting because Defensively, the Warriors are going to have to switch it up here. Just the matchups in that game, letting Tatum get the straight looks at Curry, those switches, Green playing back line. It wasn't really a formula for success when the Celtics are sharpshooting like they were.
Yeah.
So I would actually adjust if I'm Golden State and actually guard those three-point shots, let Tatum attack one-on-one against a guy like Payton, or maybe you put Green on him. I don't know what Payton's going to be able to provide just because with that left arm, you saw him in practice today, not doing too much with it.
Mm-hmm.
He might be a zero offensively to such a degree that you're going to make it easy for Boston's offense to play off him with Rob and others if he's out there. But you got to give it a shot, as you said, and I think you're pretty high on what he's going to be able to do against Tatum, Brown, or some of those other ball handlers, just because the Celtics look at their worst when they're rushed, and he's a guy that can rush the offense on the ball.
Yeah, especially when you saw the way the Celtics were defended in the Eastern Conference Finals. Getting them half court or full court.
Lowry, right?
Yeah, Lowry picking them up full court in those last couple of games. Or actually, I think it started in Game 5, but you saw it a lot more in the last two games, in Game 6 and Game 7 of that series. Obviously, Lowry was in no way, the same guy he used to be, or was he healthy? But he was still able to apply that type of pressure that I think did make an impact. So I could see someone like Gary Payton doing that as well. He's much younger. He's just itching to get in there. It's obviously his first NBA Finals appearance. So his dad's in the crowd. They're at home.
Is his dad there?
His dad was in Game 1, and I'm gonna say with about 90% sure that he'll be at Game 2 for sure. So that's big. I mean, look, he made a name for himself as that guy for this team, throughout the course of the regular season, especially when things were down. Like, he was sort of the guy who gave them that spark on the defensive end that turned their record around and put them in a good position.
I'd rather have him out there than Iguodala, I'd say.
Yeah, I agree with that, but also not to diminish Iguodala altogether, because I think that veteran leadership and the fact that he has a championship pedigree and he can sort of rough guys up. I know,
but I was stunned he was out there just because Game 2 against Denver, I believe, was the last time he played.
You make it sound like he's like 45 or something, man. Like he's Udonis Haslem. Like he can still move up and down the floor. He's close. That's fair. But look, if you get
I'm a big Iguodala guy, by the way.
If you get the Iguodala from a couple of years ago, you take that. But also, you don't want to extend the guy out there for 20 minutes. I just think he's good to sort of throw another body at someone like Tatum or Jalen, or even that second unit. He can really get them going. And then on the offensive end, he can push the ball as well in transition. So, again, I think it's more of get everybody's spirits up. I think he does make that sort of impact in the locker room. So I think we see both of them, honestly, because I think Golden State is looking at things on the defensive end and saying, man, if we just plug things up here and there in that fourth quarter, maybe things could have gone another way.
Yeah, they should be trying everything. They got Jonathan Kuminga and Moses Moody on the bench as well, who have given them some minutes at certain points this year. They have a lot of different options. They shouldn't be going too thin early in this series, I think. They got to see who works, who doesn't, what combinations can possibly unlock some things against the Celtics. But the most important thing, as we talked about there, is rushing Boston. I feel like they didn't even really try in that Game 1.
They let them settle in.
Yeah, so Celtics playing clean basketball, Warriors turned it over when the Celtics did that. Those are some of the keys to Game 1. Game 2 getting underway Sunday, 5 o'clock Pacific, 8 o'clock Eastern. We're brought to you by com.com with us throughout these playoffs, and the app's just out of control. Like, everything that's on there, there's so many different options. We were talking with Max last night. He likes some of the guided meditations at night as well.
Yeah, I was surprised. Well, not surprised, but he never talks about it. He sort of opened up against right there. Maybe he thought I'd make fun of him or something. I'm like, no, man. Like, I use Calm too, man.
He uses the beach. I use the rain. Josue does his Calm of the Day.
Calm of the Day, that's my go-to.
So many different options on there. There's bedtime stories, there's yoga, there's daytime talks to get you through your day. There's just countless stuff on there. So to get 40% off, as they're offering right now, com.com/garden, 40% off a premium subscription. You get it all, and you can try everything. This is the time of year to get your mental health right. There's really no wrong time to do it, and relaxing is key. You feel your breathing tightening up, you feel rushed, you feel frantic, you get one of those moments where just kind of the world's ending around you. All you got to do is kind of just stop, and Calm has a bunch of options to allow you to do that. Take your time, get back to being mentally there. Like, that's the most important thing on Calm, is just recentering yourself. So go invest in yourself. Calm.com/garden, 40% off a premium subscription. Never a bad time to do it, and you help out the Garden Report out here in San Francisco while you're doing it. I got a chance to catch up with Luke Kornet finally.
Did. Your boy. There you go.
This was long overdue.
Did you ask the sister for permission first? How'd you go about this?
Well, they're going to be in Boston for the home side of this, so I'll be excited to see the whole Kornet clan. But Luke finally talking, telling some fun stories. I suggest everybody go check that out at Celtics All Access about how he was being Giannis in the Buck series. He was playing Giannis in the practices, some of the scout team guys. And I do feel like there's a fun story that's getting told now. I know there were a few stories about Matt Ryan out there. Broderick Thomas was giving this team some good minutes during the middle of the season, and there's just a bunch of guys. Sam Hauser, you remember him coming in and shooting some threes in garbage time. And Payton Pritchard even was kind of part of that group early in the season, and he broke his way out of it. Aaron Nesmith. There's just so many unsung guys on this team who you have to imagine are playing big roles in practice, preparation for these series, and even just depth roles. And we look at a bunch of different stuff that happened during this season. I still think the craziest by far was that stretch in December, January, where teams are just eating up whatever young players that they can find for those replacement deals. And
I thought you were going to say something else. Along those lines, I thought you were going to say the most surprising thing was seeing Joe Johnson back in the
was one of them.
Uniform.
That time where 28 players played for the Celtics this year. Kornet, of course, among them. Johnson as well. Al-Farouq Aminu was on this team.
That's right. I forgot about
Justin Jackson. I mean, that time, there's never going to be a time like that again where just everyone in the NBA world gets an opportunity, and Kornet was one of them. Remember, he was on Milwaukee. He was on Cleveland. He was played against the Celtics, played in Maine. And he during that time when everyone was just signing those emergency deals, he was everywhere. And then he ends up back in Boston here, which, again, I think speaks to Brad's strategy of just having a pretty cohesive group, bringing Tice back, bringing Al back. And even though it might not be the same degree, I think having Kornet here last year and bringing him back again with that opportunity was a pretty good move.
I just always think it's interesting when you look back on it because you wonder, was Danny not in on those guys? It's like, I'm just speculating here, but it's just
Danny
funny.
traded Tice.
Right, but exactly. So, like, to see him come back, it's like, oh, was that he's a Brad guy, right? Maybe Brad wanted him back, and maybe they weren't on the same page in that. But then you look at, someone like Kornet and, Romeo was shipped out right away. I don't know. I'm just joking around, I guess. But I guess what I'm trying to say is I think Brad has a sort of in with certain players, right? I think he sees something in these guys. And around that time, it was interesting because to see players latch on to different teams, you never know what that could lead to. Maybe that's not the opportunity in the end that turns into, them becoming a rotation player, but maybe that happens elsewhere. And for someone like Kornet to come back, at the time, that center position, we know what we think about Rob Williams, seeing Al Horford back and Daniel Tice come back and all. So it's tougher for him, but I just think the outside shot is something that Brad Stevens is he knows that that's sort of a premium in the NBA, like finding big guys that can shoot. So we'll see what happens. He's not going to give up on him quite yet, and it's still hard to tell where he would fit in the future. But again, we never know what's going to happen. We never know if Daniel Tice is here for the next couple of years or not. But yeah, man, that was a cool interview though. That was cool. You guys are. Does he know that you interviewed his sister?
Yeah, he did.
You guys know?
He had heard about it.
Perfect. Yeah.
I asked him today. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad. I'm sure you brought it up. I wanted to see if he recognized you from the beginning. But yeah, that's cool, man. And then when they all come back in Boston, man, the finals back in Boston. Not to look too far ahead, but Game 3 to see the finals back in Boston. That's gonna be fun.
Oh, the crowd's gonna be insane. We remember Game 2 of those Miami games last series. Just the level of interaction between the crowd and the players like that. I think that you got to really pay attention to that. I don't know if it shines through on TV, but I remember Pritchard guarding Butler on that play all the way down to the end of the shot clock, and you just hear the crowd kind of going, ooh. And so I was talking to Pritchard about that today, his defense. What allows him to play in this series and even other series to varying levels of degree is that he has reached a point on this team where he can defend, and he's not a negative on that end. I'm not sure he's a plus defender. It kind of depends. But in a series like this where there's not a lot of mismatch hunting, where there's not a lot of physically imposing players on the Golden State side, there's a huge opportunity for Pritchard. And you almost look at this as a better series for Pritchard and multiple guards, just given the way the Warriors play, than it is for Grant. Because Grant has great numbers from 3 this year. I feel like Pritchard's a slightly better pure shooter than than Grant, where if you just keep feeding him, you're probably going to get more out of Pritchard from three-point land than you are Grant, but it's pretty close.
Yeah, I think you're spot on with that. And I think he's come a long way in that regard. Maybe not a long way, but he's certainly progressed into a better defender, to someone that Ime can trust out there. It happens in spurts, but I'm not quite sure if that's an indication of him being not a good enough defender to be out there for 15 minutes or so, or 15 plus minutes. The emergence of Derek White, I think, is sort of has something to do with him not getting as many minutes as we would think, or maybe it's limited his opportunity out there. But I always thought, going into the series, that it was good for him. This was a good matchup for him going up against the Warriors and going up against that backcourt. That's pretty much what I said in the Miami series. I also want to see if that could happen here, where he.
Yeah, you were high on him in that series.
Yeah, because he was able to put the ball on the floor a bit, take a couple of dribbles, shoot around the free throw line. I thought that opened things up, because the Miami Heat just gave him that. So I looked at that as an indication of him being able to read the defense at another level. I felt like last year, man, I felt like it was really hard for him to find his way. But his rookie season, it seemed like he was, a guy who had potential to crack that rotation and stay in, for the following season. That obviously wasn't the case, but the last couple of months of the season, I think he really impressed Ime to a point where he was getting those minutes and those opportunities. So I'm still high on Pritchard. I really am. I think he can find his stride, and I thought those couple, hitting those couple of threes in Game 1, I think it's a confidence booster. Something I did ask him about after Game 1, and he's like, "Hey man, this is the first for everybody here. And none of us has played here in the NBA Finals, but any sort of rhythm off the bench, any sort of scoring production off the bench, I think is a huge advantage for the Celtics, because they're just thin in that regard. I mean, Derek White is obviously scoring 20-plus points in Game 1, can set the tone, I think. But also for someone like Pritchard, man, if they can both get going in Game 2, that could really go a long way for the Celtics.
Celtics have options. It's amazing. Shooting team, they're a deep team, they're a team that has multiple layers of ball handling, and they're a team that never really stops defending, no matter what unit's out there.
That's the biggest difference. Yeah.
It's unreal. Like, they have just shown to be the more versatile, more layered team than pretty much every opponent they've played. And now we're talking about the Nets, Bucks, Heat, and Warriors. That's about as hard as it can get, and every step of the way they've shown to be the more adaptable team. Mm-hmm. And that's, whether it's bouncing back from every loss, whether it's winning road games, and they now have 8 wins in these playoffs on the road. There's just so much stuff here that makes me think they're going to be a champion. And I think all of us picked the Celtics in the series. Rare nationally. I think everybody nationally is picking the Warriors. So we'll see what the Warriors have in terms of their punch back right now. And I've said this before, so I'm probably going to get into trouble here. I don't know where they're going to go. I don't know what the answer is going to be. It's probably a big Klay Thompson game, honestly. Like, that's the guy that can go 8 for 16 and change a game. Yeah. So that's probably what we're going to see here if it is a big Warriors turnaround. Jordan Poole has the ability to do it as well, but it's not going to be easy to do against the Celtics. Game 2. Our coverage continues here in San Francisco. Celtics, CLNS, CLNSmedia.com. Go check out all the pressers from practice today on CLNS Media on YouTube. And we'll be back tomorrow on Celtics postgame, Game 2 edition. Jimmy, John back in the studio. Sherrod Blakely here with us in San Francisco as well. All 5 of us will be there postgame. And we want that room to be rocking again. 4,000 of you live the whole way after Game 1. Appreciate that. And appreciate all your continued patronage of CLNS Media's coverage throughout these playoffs. Of course, check out com.com/garden. Ton of fun out here. Continue to follow at Josue and at Real Bob Manning as well out here as we pull you into our journey out here in San Francisco. Thanks, Josue.